sites, covercrimson.com and thebarnauburn.com. Two team sites with the same excitement and information-driven content that you get every day on The Next Round. Live daily shows, recorded shows, free of charge, plus premium content with insider information starting at just $1. And it's the perfect gift for the Alabama or Auburn fan in your family. CoverCrimson.com or thebarnauburn.com. Sign up today.
Thanksgiving is here, and let the New York Butcher Shop be the place to get all of your holiday meal items. Their premium turkeys are fresh, free-range, and hormone-free. The New York Butcher Shop also has a wide selection of chef-prepared side items to help save you time in the kitchen. Pick up a bottle of wine, and your meal will be complete. Turkeys are selling fast, so place your order today. 2 locations to serve you, in Cahaba Heights and on Highway 119 in Greystone. The New York Butcher Shop. Rare quality, well-done service.
Want more of the show? Download the app or visit nextroundlive.com for the latest podcast, The Mystery Fifth Hour, our Not For All Ages podcast, The Last Call, and the entire Double Down Media podcast family. All at nextroundlive.com and on the Next Round app.
All right, it's another Monday of the Middle Eight, presented by MyBookie.ag. Code Next Round to double your initial deposit at MyBookie.ag. Oftentimes, most important part of the game, the middle 8 minutes. Last 4 of the first half, first 4 of the second half. We talk about it all the time, every Monday at 8 with Brandon Marcello of CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports. I'm Ryan Brown. We thank you for joining us. What is up, Brandon? Good Monday to you.
How are we? What's going on?
Not much. You good?
Doing very well. My little stuffy today.
It's going around. I think just about everybody is battling that. It's, I guess, just the time of year, right? The old college football playoff flu we've got going around. It is.
Plus, when you have kids, I mean, you're pretty much destined to be sick every other week.
Little petri dishes, right? Yes, little petri dishes. It was another fun weekend of college football and a lot to get to on the Middle 8 today, and Brandon will unveil his top 12 coming up a little bit later on in the show. Another weekend of games that will have college football interest, which has been to me, or college football playoff interest, I should say, which has been to me the best part of this 12-game playoff. There are so many more games each weekend, Brandon, that matter, and that was one of the goals of this. Obviously, the ultimate goal is to make more money. But that was one of the goals, is to create more interest in more games. And for me, through 12 weeks, that has been a success.
Very much so. I think, if you just think back to this past weekend, in some ways, Tennessee, Georgia would have had really no implications on the college football playoff race. Tennessee potentially, if they were to win that game and then keep winning and then get tiebreakers to somehow get in the SEC championship game. But that's a lot of hypothetical on type of hypothetical. Whereas this past week, that was legitimately like a potential elimination game. And we've had several of those already this season, and it's only going to amp up here these next 2 weeks. And it's made college football so much more fun. You've got probably 25 or so teams right now, probably a little bit less, probably about 20 or 21 teams that are still in the running for a spot in the playoff. And that obviously just creates more interesting games. Yeah,
there's no doubt it does. You mentioned Georgia. Let's start there with Georgia playing host to Tennessee. And what oddly was an elimination game for Georgia. We don't normally see the Bulldogs in that situation. But if Georgia lost, their path to the playoffs had basically dried up. They played like a team that knew that. But boy, I tell you what, in that first half, there were several Tennessee possessions. I'm like, Georgia's season is on the line here right now with this Tennessee possession.
Tennessee came out on fire in that game, didn't they?
They did.
And for a team that had struggled so much in the first half of games ever since really mid to late September, not even being able to score points for a stretch there, they came out with a lot of effort. I mean, the execution was there, but you could see they had a fire in their ass. They were getting after it. Dylan Sampson running after contact. Nico Iamaleava just really getting after it, taking off and running as well when he had to. And when they built that 10-0 lead, that was exactly the moment Georgia had to respond, and of course they did. But Tennessee kind of wilted under the pressure a little bit, obviously in the second half. But there was a possession or two there in the second half where Tennessee still had some advantages, and they weren't taking advantage of them, allowing Georgia to kind of creep back in, obviously tie the game. But Tennessee responding to make that a 17-17 game there before the end of the first half, being able to kind of keep it close, that was big. I thought Tennessee would be able to ride some momentum there. Didn't happen. I mean, it's just the problem with Tennessee is just that they can't do anything consistently. It's been like that all season. Every possession, you don't quite know what to expect. I was hopeful after watching their first 2 to 3 possessions that maybe had changed. Maybe they had finally got something in their system. Maybe it was because seeing Georgia across the sideline that got them going. But it wasn't the case there in the second half. And I love Josh Heupel as a coach, but again, that offense has been described to me by several former players in that system. It's just they throw a bunch of screens, some short passes, and then they try to go deep. And then that's about it. It's like we're running to grass out there. And not to say it becomes predictable a little bit. And Georgia, with their fast defense, really just responded in the second half. In a lot of ways, this game for Georgia reminded me of their season opener against Clemson. They just made some really solid adjustments in the second half, slowed down Tennessee, and then just kind of put a stranglehold on the game.
Yeah, if you're going – Tennessee plays to their defense, obviously. That's the strength of their team. But if you're going to go on the road to a place like Georgia, 319 yards in total offense is going to put your defense under a ton of stress. And, ultimately that's what happened. Georgia's offense got rolling, and it was enough to win the game. But to your point on that offense, you can have all the great defense you want, but you go on the road against a top-level conference team, 319 yards means you're asking a ton out of your defense.
Well, especially when nearly 100 of those yards came in the first quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it was so disappointing to me for Tennessee, because they started off so hot. They had something going. They knew what they were doing, and then it just completely fell apart from there on in. And again, Tennessee wins championships and all that, those cliches. Tennessee, they'll say defense travels, and it does to a certain extent, but it's a backbreaker in a lot of ways. You can't rely on it and ask one side of the football, whether it's offense or defense, to continue to respond week to week to week. And you're seeing it throughout college football. Tennessee relying on their defense, not quite getting it done. Miami asking them to rely on their quarterback and their offense to get them out of games, not getting it done in the big moments at all times. You can't ask one facet of a 3-facet game in football to carry your team. That's just not what works and what happens for championship programs. Carson
Beck continues his good play in Athens.
Yeah.
That has not been his issue playing in Athens. He's played well there. It has been the games away from Sanford Stadium that he has struggled in. 347 pass yards, 2 touchdowns. That is an excellent day against that Tennessee defense. Again, that's the strength of Tennessee's team, is that defense.
And he took off running when he had to. He picked his spots, picked up really good yardage there. And the development I thought that was interesting in this game compared to previous games was his reliance on the tight ends, utilizing those 3 guys, but 2 primarily, led by Oscar Delp. They were the bulk of the production there. I think the tight ends combined for, 13 catches in this game for them. And obviously Oscar Delp having 2 touchdown catches. A little bit of a new, not wrinkle, but development. Carson Beck, the big thing for him has been, does he have confidence in his receivers? What's he going to do without Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey? Well, finally, here we are, 2 weeks remaining in the regular season. Seems to be getting a little bit more confidence in his guys. He's spreading the ball out a little bit more, and maybe he's found that safety valve in an Oscar Delp or those other tight ends to get the offense going when maybe not necessarily he sees things as clearly on the field as everybody was kind of hoping we'd see.
So Georgia bounces back from the loss at Ole Miss, 31-17. They beat Tennessee. We will know more answers to what I'm about to ask you tomorrow night when we see the latest iteration of the college football playoff rankings. But without seeing that, are you comfortable as a Georgia fan today? Are you comfortable as a Tennessee fan today as it relates to the college football playoff?
I'm comfortable as a Georgia fan, as long as we don't lose again.
Yeah.
I like Georgia right now, where they're probably going to be in those rankings. Tennessee, I'd be concerned. You got to kind of hope here if you're Tennessee. You just got to wait for teams above you to lose, and the right teams above you to lose, such as like maybe in Indiana at this point. They've obviously got to go to Ohio State this week. But if I'm Tennessee, I'm a little bit worried. They've still got not very good. They got a good shot to make the playoff, But again, they've got to get some help around them. And of course, they've got to keep winning. But Georgia, I feel obviously much more confident about because of this win and also because of their resume. They've got that big win at Texas still on their resume as well to help them out. And Alabama, one of their other losses there, that's on the road in a game where you showed a valiant effort in the second half. That's going to be chalked up as a quote-unquote good loss for you. And Alabama, obviously, in the playoff hunt as well.
Yeah, if you're a Tennessee fan, you may or may not need help. Again, you'll find out Tuesday night. But these teams are going to be in front of you no matter what happens Tuesday night. You will probably want to go ahead and be a Minnesota fan Saturday against Penn State.
Yes.
Losable game for Penn State. I would say you go ahead and be an Ohio State fan against Indiana. It's a very weak resume for Indiana without a win at Ohio State. So you just go ahead, you may as well just go ahead and cheer for Minnesota and Ohio State Saturday.
Yeah, you got to hope for those Big Ten teams that have been hovering in the top 4 to 5 for the last 3 weeks to finally start losing. And obviously, one of them is going to end up losing with Ohio State, Indiana playing. But I'm glad you pointed that out. Penn State having to go to Minnesota this week. That's a very tricky spot for them. There's still I wrote this in my column today when our power rankings come out about how everybody is just so concerned. When's the chaos going to happen? Nothing's clear right now. What the hell's going to happen? Should the SEC get 6 teams to in? There's SEC bias, maybe 5 teams, 4 teams. The Big Ten's actually stronger than the SEC. What's going to happen with these tiebreaker scenarios? Oh my goodness, we don't have divisions. We still have 6 teams battling out for the SEC. The Big 12's a mess. What is this all going to look like? Well, guess what? This is all by design, It's all by design. They eliminated divisions, right?
Right.
Got all these tiebreaker scenarios. It convolutes everything. It's got all of us talking about scenarios and looking up websites that, developed by PhD doctors that help break out tiebreaker scenarios. And you input teams in, by the way. By the way, great website. I'll share the link on Twitter later. But it drums up the interest in college football, the uncertainty. And if we had divisions in the Big Ten and the SEC still, things would be a little bit more clear. And there wouldn't be as much discussion.
No, you're right.
I think this is all, not necessarily, it's an unintended consequence, but it's a great consequence for the SEC and Big Ten and for college football as a whole that happened.
Yeah, for instance, to your point, Texas A&M is at Auburn this weekend. Most years that game kind of gets overlooked. Maybe there's an upset there. But that loss could impact, say, Tennessee or somebody like that if Texas A&M loses that game. Missouri's playing Mississippi State. Alabama fans know a Missouri loss helps them. And if you're looking for the road to Atlanta. And then there becomes this great discussion. Do I even want to go to Atlanta? Right? So, you're right. The elimination of divisions has created this scenario in which I'm paying attention to games maybe I wouldn't normally pay attention to because of how they impact my team, even if I haven't played both those teams.
You haven't played those teams, and as you mentioned, those tems would have been in opposite divisions.
Yep.
From what you've seen in the past as well. So everything's compacted and everything. It's going to be. I think it is interesting though here in the future, the next 2 or 3 years, as the tiebreaker scenarios get worked out. One of these conferences that they have to go down the 5th or 6th tiebreaker to figure things out for their championship game. How that might impact them and their decision making as far as scheduling in the future, but also maybe divisions. Maybe we start talking about pod system again. Who knows? But it's good for the game. We're all talking about it right now.
Absolutely. We'll talk about Oregon at Wisconsin. The number 1 Ducks get a win on the road in the Big Ten. I remind you, though, before we do that, the show is presented by MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on at MyBookie.ag. As I talk to you, I'm just going to pull up some of the point spreads, including tonight's Monday Night Football game there in the NFL, where the Texans are a 7-point favorite right now at the Dallas Cowboys. You can play that game at MyBookie.ag. Code next round gives you double your initial deposit. You make your initial deposit, they double it when you use code next round at MyBookie.ag. MyBookie.ag, code next round. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag, code next round. Some interesting games that we'll talk about later on. Ole Miss at Florida. The Rebs a 9.5-point favorite right now at MyBookie.ag. It opened with Ohio State right around an 11-point favorite over Indiana, and it's up to 12 right now. I mentioned that Penn State-Minnesota game. Yeah, Brandon says, wow, we'll get to that. Penn State-Minnesota right now hovering around 12. It is up a little bit. Alabama, a 14-point favorite over Oklahoma in Norman. And Texas A&M, a 2.5-point road favorite at Auburn. Oregon goes to Wisconsin. There were people that thought this is a tough spot. In fact, the guy I do my show with every day, Lance Taylor, was like, hey, upset alert. Oregon has to be careful here. Tricky spot at Wisconsin. Turned out to be far trickier than many thought. Nobody has throttled down that Oregon offense this year the way that Wisconsin did on Saturday night.
Okay, all right. I agree. It was going to be a very tough spot. I did think that was going to be a close game. I thought Wisconsin was obviously going to cover the spread. I think the primary issue here, why Oregon quote-unquote struggled but still gutted out a win, it's their 8th straight game. They haven't had any rest. They've had to go across the country 3 times during this 8-game stretch.
Interesting.
They've also had to play Ohio State during that time. They've beaten 2 top 25 legitimate teams during this stretch. And you're asking them to go across the country for a 3rd time during an 8-week stretch, and they've been the number 1 team for about 5 or 6 of those games. Very difficult spot going in. They could have went to maybe anybody in the top 3/4 of the Big Ten and probably struggled a little bit because they're just tired. They're worn out. And they're finally getting a bye week this week before they close the regular season against Washington. But the big key here for Oregon is just that when they need the big plays and big moments, they deliver, right? It like the Ohio State game a month ago. When they needed a turnover, they got it. When they needed a big sack, they got it. When they needed the offense to drive down the field and score or set up a field goal, they got it. And I really love just the absolute gumption of this Oregon football team, the makeup of it. You know, everybody was criticizing Dan Lanning for the fake, was it a field goal or
fake
punt?
Field goal. It was an odd decision. There's no doubt.
Odd decision, but it's just like, I love that shit because it's just like, you don't know what to expect from me.
Yeah.
Even if we're in a tight spot, down against a team we should be winning, I don't care. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do this stuff. And they were able to rely on Jordan James. I think he had a career-high 25 carries in this game.
Yep.
To get the offense going and get them just enough to get out of there and go home and finally rest up and gather themselves. I mean, you're able to win a game in the Big Ten on the road against a very good Wisconsin team, and Dylan Gabriel didn't score a single freaking touchdown. So only the 3rd time in 60 career starts that he hasn't scored, and they still won on the road. Oregon gutted it out, got it done.
And in all likelihood now is going to be the lone undefeated team there in the regular season when all this is said and done, and we'll be in the Big Ten championship game against really the winner of Ohio State and Indiana, it appears. So they have clinched that much. Dan Lanning is just a guy, you can wait for him to be conventional. He's just not going to do that. That is not his makeup, as you said. It's not who he is. It drives a lot of traditional football fans insane. They're like, why on earth would you do things like that? And I don't know that there are analytics that tell Dan Lanning to do things like that. I think he's just a guy that flies by the seat of his pants, might be an overstatement. Just it seems like he's just got a gut feeling. He goes with that gut feeling and trusts his players to pull it off.
Yeah, some of it is that. Some of it is analytics. I agree with that very much so. And here's the thing. I wanted to get back to this. We remember when we were all wondering, like, if Oregon even a top 10 team? You know, they struggled against Idaho. They struggled against Boise State, which Boise State's obviously much, 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 much better than we thought they were. And they end up pulling that one off by a field goal. And Oregon, when we look at teams, like to compare teams, we always love to compare teams, right? Like, what does Oregon look like? Oregon looks like Notre Dame right now. And Notre Dame looks like Oregon to me when I watch those two teams play. And I say that to say this. If Oregon played Northern Illinois instead of Idaho or Boise State even, maybe they lose the game at home against Northern Illinois because they like to play in the muck and get you down. And Notre Dame lost that game earlier this year. And Notre Dame responded by winning 8 straight games. And they're winning every game by double digits. They're impressive. They're getting really solid quarterback play from Riley Leonard, who's playing like a veteran, much like Dylan Gabriel, who's the veteran of veterans with 60 starts in his career. But when I look at Notre Dame, I see a lot of Oregon and Notre Dame. So I still have issues with some people out there going, Notre Dame doesn't even deserve to be discussed in the top 5 or top 8 even. And I disagree with that. Have you watched Notre Dame play since the Northern Illinois game? Have you seen them improve week to week? Have you seen their defense absolutely shut everybody down? I mean, Notre Dame is playing a lot like Oregon right now. I know we're talking about the Ducks right now, but I wanted to expand on that a little bit further because Oregon, everybody's like unquestioned number 1 right now. But goodness gracious, just 2 months ago, we were thinking, man, Oregon's not even a top 10 team. They nearly got beat by Idaho. They should have lost to Boise State at home. But no team is static week to week. They change week to week. They either improve every week or they get worse every week. Oregon's improved, and so is Notre Dame. I really like the makeup of both of those teams going into the playoff.
Yeah, Oregon only with Washington left after this bye, then a Big Ten championship game. And Notre Dame's got Army. They're a 16.5-point favorite right now at mybookie.ag. And then USC, which hasn't shown a ton of life, but that's a rivalry game in L.A. You never know.
And they put a new quarterback in, Maivia.
Yeah.
They got something going there, the former UNLV quarterback, but still, we won't really probably talk about this game, but that USC Nebraska game this past week was very good to watch, but one they could have easily lost against a very average Nebraska team.
I do want to go back to Wisconsin quickly before we move on from this game. In the wake of that loss, they fire Phil Longo, who was the offensive coordinator for Luke Fickell. It felt like a square peg, round hole hiring from the very beginning. It's just so far. It's Bill Callahan at Nebraska. It is just such a departure from what you've always done, which is not always a bad thing, but this one just never fit.
Never fit. The personnel was weird as well. They've had 5 different quarterbacks to work with just in the season and a half, really, that he's been there. None of them have worked out for them. They brought in 2 different transfers, obviously the former SMU quarterback, and then this year as well. None of it's worked. Was a square peg in a round hole. Phil Longo is one of those coaches in the industry, whenever I talk about him to agents and other coaches, like it's like a 50-50 split. People thinking he's awesome and other people going, that guy's not very good. I think he's a great coordinator. We've seen it previously in North Carolina. He worked at Ole Miss previously. He'll land somewhere here and do very well, but if I'm him, I'm looking for a spot where I can go in and be a little bit more successful with my system, because going to Wisconsin and asking them, hey, we not only want you to come in and change what we've been doing traditionally our entire existence, but you need to do it overnight. I mean, I know you can quote unquote do that with the portal era, but still, that's still a very difficult ask to ask a coordinator to do that. And it just wasn't going to quite work. It'd be interesting to see what type of system they try to institute here going into next season.
Yeah, because that feels important for Luke Fickell, right? I mean, this is a guy
absolutely.
that
I think he's on a warm seat next year.
Yeah, 13-11 in his third year now at Wisconsin, 8-8 in conference. They expect better than that. The conference is only getting more difficult. One would think it is with the addition of Oregon, and then maybe if USC and UCLA can get it going. We talked about eliminating divisions. All those Big Ten West teams, eliminating divisions meant they no longer had that path to the Big Ten championship. It's a much more difficult path now. So for a guy like Luke Fickell, I mean, normally you get to fire coordinators one time, and that is your get out of jail free card, and then it's what you do after that. So it appears that's what is ahead for him.
Especially when it's a coordinator that defined what you are building your pillars on, your foundation on there, and you fire them, less than 2 seasons into it, and that means you better deliver next year. Absolutely.
All right, let's go to the Big 12 race, mybookie.ag, code next round. That is who brings you the show. Code next round when you use mybookie.ag. You make your initial deposit to play. They double that deposit with code next round at mybookie.ag. All eyes were on Boulder, Colorado, because all of a sudden the Buffaloes, one of the great stories of college football, control their own destiny to the Big 12 championship game. Here comes Utah, a team a lot of people thought would factor in that race. They have not. But Utah had just almost beaten BYU. Controversial loss, so a lot of people thought Utah had a little something for Colorado. To their credit, they hung with them for a little bit. But boy, once the Buffs flipped that fourth quarter switch, it was a boat race in that last stanza, 49-24. Impressive win by Coach Prime and the Buffaloes.
Yeah, and Utah coach Kyle Whittingham, who's been doing this forever, said after the game, that's the best team we've played all year.
Yeah.
And they had just played BYU. Impressive win. Here's the key for Colorado. They've obviously got to me, I don't know what else anybody else is saying. They've got the best quarterback receiver tandem in all college football with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, in addition to the other 2 to 3 receivers they've got that step up every single week. We know that. But the big thing for Colorado that they can hang their hat on right now is their freaking defense and their defensive line. Incredible stuff. 3 interceptions this past week. Travis Hunter, of course, having one of those. They had 4 sacks, 4 TFLs, or not 4 TFLs, 9 TFLs, I believe, creating havoc. We talk about havoc rate and all that. Colorado's doing that now. And I watched Colorado in person this year in their opener. And obviously, I watch as many games across college football as I can every single week. They have improved every single freaking week, especially along that defensive front. They look so much different than they did in that opener. They look so much different than they did in that loss at Nebraska. And I'll say this. I think the key to this quote-unquote turnaround, so to speak, was the second half of that Nebraska game early in the season. They really kept fighting. They kept fighting out there. They got down big in the first half and then made it a game, really, when we talk about just starting 0-0 at halftime. And I was impressed by that, and they built off of it. It's been a hell of a coaching job by Deion Sanders, and especially that defensive room and the defensive coordinator there and the defensive line coaches, helped by, obviously, Warren Sapp. They've done an incredible job this year, and a legit, obviously, playoff contender, but is going to be a threat if they make the field because of what they can do offensively. But again, the havoc rate that they're causing defensively, that has not been talked about enough. They're doing a fantastic job against teams.
Yeah, I think a lot of people looked at the Warren Sapp hire and were like, okay, they're just hiring celebrity names now. That guy's actually done a really good job. I mean, that defensive front has played well under Warren Sapp.
Watch him coach on the side. I mean, the future of football, right, on television. We need more cameras on coaches when they're coaching during timeouts and everything like that. Some sports nowadays, they started doing the picture-in-picture during commercial breaks, We haven't seen that with college football come yet, but we need to. That's the next iteration, I think. We need to see that so they can keep the cameras on these coaches, the assistants specifically, during these 3-minute TV timeouts and watching them coach players up. And if you watch Warren Sapp, he's very into it, obviously, but that guy is always coaching. I mean, he's yelling things out and adjustments and stuff. I saw the North Dakota State game right before the play's happening to everybody. Obviously, those guys can't quite hear him, but that guy's really into it. And a lot of coaches are like that. But, man, I'd really love it if we could do that with television and college football in the future. Do some picture-in-picture stuff during these commercial breaks so we get to focus in a camera on the assistant coaches as they're coaching their guys up during these timeouts.
Beware of the Kansas Jayhawks, though, Colorado. They're only a 2.5-point favorite in Kansas City at Arrowhead in that game. Colorado is. Road game 2:30 on Fox Saturday. That is a tricky game because Kansas is playing improved football, and they showed that late night Saturday when they went to Provo and beat BYU. Now, look, BYU was a team that was flying close to the sun. They had staved off execution a couple times already, and it finally caught up with them with Kansas. But this is an improved Kansas team playing close to what a lot of people thought they would play like this entire season now.
Yeah, it was like their highest ranked win on the road in since I think the 90s, I was reading. And BYU, I think everybody been complaining about, should they be in the top 5 or whatever, top 4. And a lot of us were holding them back as a result. I think I had them 10th or maybe a little bit below that this past week. Obviously, they're going to drop further. But it's just you saw this kind of coming. You knew this coming. And Vegas knows all, right? I mean, what? BYU was only a 3-point home favorite against Kansas. So this is very much upset central for them. And, Kansas gets that ball to ricochet off of the BYU player on a punt. And that sets up the offense for a touchdown. That was the difference, for a score, I should say. And that was the difference. BYU trying to get it done late in the game again, just couldn't get it done. But, yeah, tricky spot for Colorado. What an interesting backdrop coming up this week for Colorado. Obviously playing a tough Kansas team, but they get to go to Arrowhead in NFL Stadium. And Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter and all those guys get to go out there and, like, not prove themselves, but get to play in an NFL Stadium. I think that's going to be a nice, interesting backdrop and something that will really kind of juice them up a little bit further as well.
Yeah, have to go on the road. Maybe a little trickier game than you might think when you look at records. But Kansas playing better football, so that's who Colorado plays. We'll talk about these conference races when we come back with Brandon. It is the Middle Eight. We do it every single Monday morning, 8 o'clock a.m. Central, where we talk about the weekend that was of college football. You can see Brandon on social media, at @bmarcello on social media, and read him at CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports, and see him there as well. The show is presented by MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on at MyBookie.ag. You make your initial deposit. They double that deposit for you when you use code next round. Double your initial deposit at MyBookie.ag. Monday Night Football tonight. You got the Cowboys as a 7-point home dog. You want to play that game? You can play it right there at MyBookie.ag. Use code next round to double your initial deposit. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. Code next round. Also, Rhoback.com. Rhoback has all the great golf polos, the quarter zips, the hoodies, and the pants, all great for the gift-giving season. You can see more at Rhoback.com and use code TNR20 and save there as well. 20% off your initial order at Rhoback.com when you use code TNR20. Rhoback.com, TNR20 to save 20%. More of the Middle Eight with Brandon Marcello is next.
Follow Dunaway on Twitter and Instagram at jimdunaway.
We talk about all the biggest games every Monday at 10:30 with Fox Sports analyst Joel Klatt. Presented by MyBookie.ag. Promo code next round. If it is meaningful at all in college football, we cover it Mondays with Joel Klatt. Presented by MyBookie.ag on the next round.
This hour of The Next Round is presented by the Birmingham Racecourse Casino, now featuring 7 days of giveaways with your chance to win a share of up to $125,000. The more you visit the Birmingham Racecourse Casino, the more chances you have to win.
Remember the name Way to Wellness if you're battling weight loss in your life. I'm Jim Dunaway from The Next Round. There was a time I was over 216 pounds until Way to Wellness helped me lose 45 pounds, and now for over 2 years, they've helped me keep that weight off. Here's their website, aplanforme.com, aplanforme.com. That's a great name for a website because there's no cookie-cutter plan. Everything is designed specifically for you. No contract, no sign-up fees, and your first consultation is free at Way to Wellness. Storm season is here. Make sure you have a plan of action in place right now. Greg from Pell City and Storm Restoration Roofing should be your first call when storms hit. Insurance companies love working with Storm Restoration Roofing because of Greg Nelson's name and reputation in the industry. When storms hit, call Greg Nelson. He's local, 205-542-3531. He's the home of the free no-cost roof inspection. Greg from Pell City on Facebook, 205-542-3531. It's Storm Restoration Roofing.
Follow Next Round Live on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. The social media team at Next Round Live is dedicated to giving you daily news conferences and practice video from UAB, Alabama, Auburn, and around college football. Follow and compare to the sites you used to visit. You'll also get the latest highlights and news from the Next Round Daily Show. Turn on the notifications so you don't miss a thing. Next Round Live on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. See more at nextroundlive.com.
By now, you guys know how I feel about my fashion. However, did you know that I care about your fashion choices? Cargo shorts are out, flip-flops are only appropriate on the boat, and please throw away that stained t-shirt from college. You may be thinking, EG, that's all I own. What do I do? Here's what you do. Go to nextround.store and fill your cart with a wardrobe that is approved by me. Stock up on logo t-shirts, hoodies for football season, and hats for every day of the week. Trust me on this one and head over to nextround.store to get stocked up for this season.
At Academy Sports and Outdoors, we believe the best holiday fun happens out there. On the driveway with a new basketball hoop, out back around the fire pit, or up in the deer stand. No matter your fun, we've got it. The right stuff at the right price. Academy, have fun out there.
Hey, Lance Taylor from the Next Round to tell you about one of our favorite places for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That is Hamburger Heaven since 1982. Hamburger Heaven has been serving Birmingham's best hamburgers, cheeseburgers, French fries, hand-spun milkshakes, and sandwiches made fresh to order. All of their ingredients are fresh and prepared daily. This includes their beef, always fresh, never frozen, hand-pattied each and every day. For breakfast, lunch, or dinner, visit any of the 4 locations, Highway 280, Irondale, Gardendale, and Homewood.
Just because you've quit going to the gym, it doesn't mean that you have to quit gym altogether. Dunaway, that is. With our Next Round podcasts open 24/7, 365, you can access gym anytime you'd like. While you may have done away with your treadmill routine, our version of Dunaway is standing by ready to get you back to your absolute best. Find all that lovely Jimmy D-led content on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and in the podcast section of nextroundlive.com. This message is sponsored by Jimmy Crypto Inc. and Jimmy Crypto for President.
All right, it's the Middle 8 presented by MyBookie.ag. Code Next Round when you sign on. Brandon Marcello, 24/7 Sports at CBS Sports with us each Monday. I'm Ryan Brown. We thank you for joining us on the Middle 8. We've got the Next Round coming up wherever you watch or listen to this show. The Next Round will be next. More college football discussion after another fun weekend. Before we move on to another game, I want to pick up where we left off there, Brandon, because I was never particularly a big fan of a non-Big 12 champion participant in the college football playoff. I think even a one-loss BYU was going to have trouble had they not won their conference championship game. With the loss to Kansas, it is completely over now. We are looking at a one-bid league for sure now with the Big 12.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it obviously been trending that way anyway. Potentially, I think BYU was going to have to just start blowing some teams out potentially, and then lose a close one to Colorado in the Big 12 championship game for the Big 12 maybe to get 2 teams in. But it's looking like a one big league at this point. And I would say I haven't looked at the odds or anything like that, but just from watching things myself, Colorado looks like the favorite to win the Big 12 now at this point and be that one team to come out of the conference.
Yeah, I do believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I do believe in most of the gambling markets there, Colorado has moved to the conference championship favorite. I don't know why they would not. To your point, when you watch with the naked eye, this is a good BYU team that has got some obvious flaws, and it's not a flaw-free Colorado team, but they are an ascending team, and it feels like BYU's sputtering just a little bit right now.
Yeah, and BYU's been sputtering for the better part of 3 weeks as well. Colorado's been surging for the better part of 2 months.
I ask you, is this the same case for the ACC, do you think? Clemson is still factoring in. They need a Miami loss. Miami's still got to go to Syracuse at the end of the year. It's kind of a tricky game for them. Clemson needs that loss. But, boy, Clemson was teetering on the verge of disaster and not even factoring into this in the city of Pittsburgh, and they pulled one out of the fire on Saturday.
Yeah, Kate Klubnik getting that 50-yard touchdown run in the final 2 minutes. It's incredible because Pitt had only allowed for that game 58 yards total rushing, and 50 of them came on that touchdown run. A little bit of Clemson magic there for them. And Pitt should have won that game and should have won it with a backup quarterback as well. Pitt just tells you how quickly a season can go south when you kind of lose a guy after losing a game, as they did at SMU just a couple weeks ago. Now they've lost 3 straight. Out of the ACC picture, out of the playoff picture, whereas just 3 weeks ago, we're looking at them as a potential ACC champion and obviously maybe one of those 2 teams from the ACC that can get into the playoff.
Miami still plays Wake this Saturday. That is a home game for them, 11 a.m. ESPN game against Wake, who is 4-6. And then I mentioned at Syracuse, they would have to lose again. Clemson is finished with ACC play. They've got only Wofford and a tricky home game against South Carolina left, but that will not factor into them making the playoffs. That South Carolina game, it's all about winning the conference for Clemson to get in. And then there's SMU. SMU's still undefeated in conference play. I was looking at, Brandon, who they had left. It's Virginia and Cal, if memory serves. Virginia and Cal.
Yeah, Virginia this week.
Yeah, Virginia this week, and then Cal in their rivalry weekend game, that historic Cal SMU rivalry that we all have loved over the years. But SMU wins again by 10 over Boston College, 38-28, still to hold that top spot. Earlier this past week, Rhett Lashley had gone into the little of the campaign cycle talking about strength of schedule, strength of the ACC, maybe stronger than everybody thinks. It's funny hearing a guy in his school in their very first year in a conference already doing that.
Yeah, you got to do it too, and you have to, because if you lose a game before you get to the ACC championship game, if you get into it, there's going to be those questions as well. And also, you're just trying to project onto the voters and the playoff committee that SMU at this moment deserves to be higher than what they are at this moment, which is arguable. It's an interesting stance to take, and obviously one that holds some merit there. And then this past week, beating Boston College, you just get it done. The defense for them stepped up there late. They had back-to-back sacks, third and fourth down, and then they put the offense back on the field. And instead of just kneeling the ball out, they try to run the ball and then end up scoring a touchdown to make it a 10-point win instead of just a field goal win. So obviously some quote-unquote style points there to try, and at least for the people just looking at the score, kind of bump up SMU. And you're looking for any advantage in this playoff race and the rankings race, so to speak, to bump up. And, SMU did what they had to do against a spicy Boston College team that obviously's put in a new quarterback. They benched Thomas Castellanos a couple of weeks ago, and now he's leaving the team. And, they've done a very good job there at Boston College this season. But SMU, also one of those teams that just has played a tougher than maybe a lot of people know schedule. And they've gotten through it. And they're undefeated in the ACC right now, which is nothing to sneeze at, especially in your first year. But SMU winning because I've said this all year. In the offseason, they went in the transfer portal. They got 13 Power 5 offensive and defensive linemen from other schools, and now they've built up that depth, and it's showing up on game days. And it certainly showed up when they needed big plays against Boston College with back-to-back sacks to end their upset bid on third and fourth down this past Saturday.
And then there's the case of the SEC as it pertains to the playoffs and the conference standings. We'll discuss that as we discuss Texas and Arkansas from this past weekend, because there is a very high likelihood of 5 6-2 teams when all this is said and done. Mm-hmm. There's a possibility of 6 6-2 teams when all this is said and done, 2 of which will be playing in Atlanta, 1 of which will pick up their third loss. You see Texas at Arkansas this weekend. It's a big rivalry game. There's a lot of bad blood there. You live up in that area. Arkansas fans absolutely despise the Texas Longhorns.
Oh, they hate them, man, especially the old heads who are used to the Southwest Conference rivalry. I don't know if it was a morning kickoff or what. I was at the game, and it just the crowd wasn't as into it as I thought they were going to be.
Interesting.
And it was very weird. I was not expecting that. And then, Texas jumps out early, and but then Arkansas got back in it late in the third quarter, and the crowd finally came to life to give them some propulsion, so to speak. But then Arkansas made mistakes, fumbled the ball, and Texas was able to kind of ice the game after being up double digits. Texas, this is my first time seeing them in person, and they're just more talented than almost everybody on the schedule, and they just kind of coast with that, it seems like. And in this game, they were so intent on establishing the run, and they really struggled to do that, but still got up 10-0. But they gave an opportunity. They gave hope to Arkansas, and Arkansas got within a possession and then got within a field goal. And all of a sudden you're going, man, what the hell is Texas doing? They're just playing with their food. But then Texas comes out and scores a touchdown, kind of pull the game out. And it just seems like Texas is a team that's so talented that they're okay with going back and forth with playing with their food and then devouring it, right? And that's fine against most people on their schedule. Can't do that against Georgia, obviously. They've done that already and lost. Not going to be able to do that against Alabama, potentially. So Texas, like a top 4 team right now, top 5, and I've got them up there too, but like I watch them and I go, am I just doing that because they got so much damn talent? And I'm all like, well, at any moment they could just blow someone out and just, but they're not doing it really. And then you look at their resume, they've got 7 wins of 19 points or more, which is tied with Oregon for the most in the country. And then you're like, really? It doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
But they do. It's just a very strange team. And some of my colleagues were talking in the press box after the game. They're just a boring ass team to watch and to cover. Like there's just like no juice there. There's nothing really interesting other than to talk about, is Arch Manning going to play?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a weird team, and it's just hard to peg them, but they're so damn talented, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they're coasting on right now.
Well, Oklahoma fans warned us this was going to be the case, because Oklahoma fans warned us that Texas had been given the favorable schedule from the Southeastern Conference. And Oklahoma fans are right. They got the tougher schedule. As it turns out, though, that favorable schedule might bite them in the butt. If they don't make Atlanta, they are one of the 2 lost teams that the committee is picking between. You just made the point that the committee is going to have to look at, what has Texas really done? They've won the games. They're supposed to win, but against whom, right? I mean, to this point, their best win is either Vanderbilt or Michigan, whichever one you want to make the case for.
Vanderbilt.
I would say Vanderbilt. I would agree with you. By the end of the year, maybe it's Michigan. Vanderbilt's got a tough road ahead. But that aside, if I'm having to make a case for Texas outside of that logo and those colors and that fan base, it's a hard case to make.
I think in a lot of ways, season ender against Texas A&M might actually be a playoff elimination game.
I kind of agree with you, yeah.
Even though Texas might be like number 3 in the country at that point. And it's crazy to say that, but I'm not saying they fall out of the top 12 immediately that next week, but after the conference championship weekend, if Texas isn't in it, yeah, certainly they could. And so it really comes down to like a 1-game season for them, because as you said, they just don't have that really strong win on their schedule. You'll see a lot of politicking, of course, from the Texas side if they end up losing against Texas A&M potentially, because it's on the road at College Station as well. But yeah, having said all that, I still think we're going to see Texas and Alabama in the SEC championship game.
It's trending that way, and that's why when those who might have heard you say against Alabama, like, wait a minute, Texas doesn't play Alabama. Well, there's a pretty good chance they actually do in the conference championship game. There's a lot that has to be determined over the next 2 weeks, but right now, if you plug in all the information, the top 2 teams that pop out more often than not are Texas and Alabama. So we'll see. We'll see who ends up there, but I don't think the SEC, for Texas' first year in the conference, to get a conference championship game featuring brands like Texas and Alabama, I think the SEC would be like, okay, I'll sign up for that.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, this is all part of the bigger equation that's going to affect things when we look at further college football playoff expansion and whether the SEC decides to go to 9 games from 8 conference games, or maybe they decide to push ahead the idea of partnering with the Big Ten and doing more non-conference games to help their strength of schedule while also maybe bringing down the Big Ten schedule or boosting it up so that the Big Ten and the SEC are seen in similar eyes by the committee, even if it appears that one conference is better than the other. A little weird to say that, but maybe the SEC is kind of grabbing the coattails of the Big Ten in a certain way potentially here in the future.
Before we get to your top 12, I want to talk some coaching situations. From the game you were just discussing, Sam Pittman is now at 5-5. They've got a game that will get them bowl eligible in all likelihood Saturday against Louisiana Tech. Is that enough for Sam Pittman? Making a bowl, is he okay there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Does he? I mean, we'll see. He's got hip surgery coming up at the end of the season.
Okay.
He's had 5 years at Arkansas. His best year was mostly with Chad Morris players. He's got a reasonable, if not a little bit high, buyout. He doesn't want to coach forever. We'll see.
Okay. Heavy hints from Brendan there.
There's a lot of chatter still behind the scenes at Arkansas. And obviously this week's big for him. I mean, you can't lose Louisiana Tech and then maybe expect to still be back or say, hey, come back as our coach. But, there's a lot of, with any any big time program, SEC program, there's a lot of parts in the machine, a lot of gears in the machine that are even outside the athletics department. And some things you can't control, some things you can control with boosters and all that. And I think it's unpredictable at this moment, I'll tell you.
Okay.
That's my read on the situation. And I live here. I know a lot of people. It's a little unpredictable, right?
It bears watching. It bears watching is what you're telling me.
Yes.
Let's go to Billy Napier. They got the big win over LSU, one of the bigger wins in his coaching tenure. Still a ranked team at that time, obviously. Has he done enough? It looks like they're going to go bowling. They've got Florida State left. Do you think that's Scott Strickland has said he's coming back next year. Is he coming back now with a mandate, having gone bowling? Do you think he's done enough, not just to save his job, but to turn that fan base around into thinking, okay, this is a good decision to bring him back?
Maybe not everybody, maybe a little bit, maybe like 5% of the fan base, but it's a good start. I mean, they've been playing better for the last month and a half. We all know that. I think even the most cynical Florida fan that wants Billy Napier out would say that. DJ Lagway, not all the way healthy, but he's coming back now. And listen, I think everybody was saying this, that if Billy Napier somehow wins 6 or 7 games with that freaking schedule, one of the most difficult schedules in college football history, he should be like Coach of the Year material. So, yeah, if they get to a bowl game this year, I think you have to say, hey, good job, Billy. Yeah. That's great. But now you got to win next year, baby.
That's right.
Let's win. Yep. Let's win 9 games. Let's do that. So, again, I think, a lot of this is so unpredictable, but back in September, he looked like dead men walking because not only was he losing games, he's getting blown out at home. But credit to him and that staff, they kept the team together. That thing could have fell apart quickly, especially in this portal era, and it didn't happen. They kept them together, and it's a very admirable job that they've performed.
On the other sideline, Brian Kelly's got a $60 million buyout. I'm not suggesting I'm not suggesting he's about to lose his job, but I am suggesting LSU fans probably the patience is running thin with Brian Kelly and this staff in Baton Rouge.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, a lot of people there, including some boosters, want his ass out now. Not going to happen. Because that buyout, as you mentioned, I mean, it's an incredible story on many angles. But Brian Kelly, which the stigma has been, you left Notre Dame because you felt like you hit your head against the glass ceiling there, and you wanted to join an ultra competitive conference where you could be able to get some deeper talent in Louisiana and LSU, and you're not doing anything with it. You've had a Heisman Trophy winner, obviously, last year. You've had like generational type offense last year. And you're losing multiple games. Then you go into this year, the offense is taking like a half to a full step back. Your defense is maybe taking a half step forward from a historically bad defense last year. It's just you can't put it all together year to year, right? And what makes this year so glaring of an issue to me is that in year 3 is when his stuff all comes together, right? That's when he's been undefeated in 2 previous stops in the regular season, including at Notre Dame. He wins conference titles in his 3rd year. And yet we're sitting here talking about LSU and going, his best year was his first year. This is the year his culture sets in, he says. This is when his players come along. It's when he's got some older guys he's developed. But in this day and age, college football, it's changed because of the portal and everything. And this year, it didn't all come together. So what does that mean for year 4 and year 5? Do you hit the portal again and try to figure some things out? Certainly you do. But is Brian Kelly the guy that's going to win you an SEC championship and get into the playoff and make a deep run? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's that coach anymore.
Yeah. The questions are very legitimate as to whether he is or not. All right, Brandon is going to unveil his top 12 of his top 25. There is his Power 12 for us. After I remind you that MyBookie.ag brings you the show. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. You use code NEXTROUND when you make your initial deposit, and they double that deposit when you use code NEXTROUND. Double your initial deposit at MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. We've got a lot of college games we've talked about today, some of those point spreads. Monday Night Football tonight, you can play at MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND. Also, Roback.com, code TNR20 is what helps you save there at Roback.com. All the great golf polos, the quarter zips, the comfortable hoodies, best hoodies I've ever had, the pants, everything right there at Roback.com. Great gift-giving idea for anyone in your life, really. They got men's and women's clothing there at Roback. Code TNR20, code TNR20. Also some team-specific gear with some of your favorite college football teams there at roback.com. Code TNR20 at roback.com to save 20% off your initial order. All right, each week, Brandon unveils his top 12 with us right here on this show. Let's see if Oregon's scare at Wisconsin dropped the Ducks. It did not. They are still number 1 with Ohio State number 2, Indiana 3, Texas 4. You've got that 2 versus 3 set up there, Brandon, in your power rankings in your top 12 coming up this Saturday.
Yeah, and I dropped Texas from 3 to 4 after watching them in person this week again. As I mentioned earlier in the show, they're more talented than practically everybody on the schedule, but they're just so freaking weird and boring. And they seem to rest on their laurels quite a bit, and it worries me. Defense is incredible, by the way. One of the better defenses I've seen this season. So, yeah, Indiana for now. And also, again, time tells, and it's going to settle these rankings anyway. So now we got Ohio State and Indiana coming up this week to kind of settle which team remains in the top 4.
5 through 8, you've got Notre Dame, Penn State, Alabama, Ole Miss, and then you round it out with Georgia, SMU, Tennessee, Boise State. You run into that thing I did when I was an AP voter. You start getting these teams that have the like records. One's beaten one, one's lost to another. It's hard to sort them out sometimes.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are talking about that with the SEC teams. You know, we talk about Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee. But I think it's a pretty clear line of demarcation among all those teams where they belong in the rankings, in my opinion. So that was actually a pretty easy exercise for me. What I did struggle with was like kind of where to put SMU and Boise State. You know, when I looked at resume and all of that in the power rankings, and I put SMU at 10 for now, Boise State at 12 still. They're kind of just hovering right there. But with all these games still and these teams ahead of them in the rankings for like Boise State, very much still alive, Boise State, to obviously get in the playoff, but maybe get a first-round bye as the 4th highest ranked conference champion, I should say.
All right, another fun weekend coming up. We'll do it again next Monday at 8 a.m. Central with the Middle 8. He is Brandon Marcello of CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports. Have a great week, Brandon. Always good to talk to you.
All right, see you, everybody.
Yep, thank you. More college football coming up with the next round. Wherever you're watching or listening, just click that link when it goes live for the next round. It is next.